I'll go ahead and kick us off. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Workforce Wednesday webinar. My name is Kirsten Bayer, and I am from the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University. I will be on for technical support and moderation today. Today we are joined by Sarah Goldammer from SIPDC. I will let her introduce herself here in a second, but we're going to be listening to her discuss the psychology of scarcity, why questionable decisions may make perfect sense. So we're excited to hear about this presentation from her. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. We are on Zoom meeting today, not Zoom webinar. We are typically on Zoom webinar for Workforce Wednesday webinars, if you've ever been on one before. So because of that, you are allowed to unmute yourselves, turn your cameras on, fully participate and immerse yourself. Just want to make sure that everyone is aware that we are recording today's webinar. So if you have your cameras on, just be mindful of that. And then also just be mindful of keeping your microphones muted while the presentation is going on. And then whenever Sarah stops for questions or an opportunity to make a comment, then feel free to participate. So just be mindful of those microphones as well, so we can eliminate any interruptions or background noise. We appreciate that. We do have closed captioning on today for accessibility reasons or note-taking purposes, so feel free to turn that on for yourself. And then we are recording today's webinar, and the recording as well as the PowerPoint slides and a handout that Sarah has provided you all today will be available on our website. Our website is the IllinoisWorkforceAcademy.com. I can put that in the chat momentarily. It also will be available on Illinois WorkNet's website too. We also will have a follow-up email that goes out tomorrow, and it will have the URL with the website where you can find the recording and slides, as well as a follow-up survey. We do really appreciate your participation on the follow-up survey. We've shortened it. We've made it shorter, so it's only about 6 questions now instead of 11. And I, myself and Sarah, we both sit on the WEO Professional Development Committee, and we really do look at the feedback from those surveys. I compile them every year for the committee, and we look at the data, see if the presentations are really meeting the system where they're at. And so we hope that we're able to do that for you. And there's a question on there where you can also put future topics that you would like to have professional development on. And so we want to make sure that we are meeting the center or meeting the state and the system in your needs for PD. So before we get started with Sarah, let me just do our beginning Workforce Wednesday webinar polls. I'll go ahead and launch the first one, which is just which partner do you best represent? So if you could answer that very quickly for us. Take about 30 seconds to answer it. If you're from Title 1, 2, 3, or 4. Couple more seconds. Okay. Looks like we have a lot of people on from Title 1 and 2 and 3 actually as well, and a good sprinkle of people from Title 4 too. That's awesome. So thank you for participating in that. And then the last poll that we'll do really quickly is just where is your local area today? So if you could go ahead and answer that, just so that we are making sure from an analytical standpoint that we are meeting everyone across the state, because we want to make sure we're hitting the whole state. And our marketing efforts are going out across the state. And then also, while everyone's answering that poll, just a disclaimer, if you are interested in learning more about Title II Adult Education Professional Development Credit for this webinar, you can receive that. Go ahead and email Linda Zimmerman. I'm going to put that in the chat. And that is who you will email if you are interested in PD credit for this webinar. All right, I'll go ahead and end that poll, and looks like we have a good span across the state. That's awesome. Thank you so much for participating. And I will hand it off to Sarah Goldammer to introduce herself and get us started.
Thanks, Kirsten, and thanks everybody for jumping on today for this webinar. And I did just put in the chat a link to a Google Doc if you want to make a copy and take notes. Kirsten, I think you also have a Word version of that. If you're able to maybe put that in the chat, if anybody wants to follow along, it's a little note-taking guide. It is basically the content that's on the slides in a accessible format for you if you have a screen reader and want to go back to it, and a place that you can take notes. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in and get started. And welcome to the Psychology of Scarcity, Why Questionable Decisions May Make Perfect Sense. As Kirsten said, my name is Sarah Goldammer, and I am from Title II. I'm from SIPDC, which is part of the Illinois Community College Board Professional Development Network. So once again, I am hoping, and this is the reason that you're in a meeting instead of a webinar today. I asked Kirsten to set it up that way because I am really hoping that you guys want to interact. I'm hoping that you want to share some of your personal experiences. I'm going to ask you throughout to put things in the chat, and or if you want to unmute, you can do that as well. So please, but I do ask that you stay muted unless there's a time that you're called upon to talk, just because it can be really distracting to have background noises. So here's the first question. Why did you commit 1 hour of your life to this presentation? I know some of you on here, I'm seeing some familiar faces, and I know you have incredibly busy lives. So why did you decide to take 1 hour to do this? And maybe the second question, the answer to that is the reason for the first, but if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat why you committed to this 1 hour. And while you're doing that, I'm going to just point out to you something that even a free webinar still has a cost associated with it. It's an opportunity cost. It costs you 1 hour of your life. And so some people may have registered for this webinar, but then they're like, "Ooh, life happened, work happened," and they couldn't afford the high cost of 1 hour. So maybe they're like, "Oh, I'll listen to the recording later." So in everything that we talk about today, we're going to talk about the cost of everything, and that also that we all have scarcity someplace in our life. And this research that I'm going to share with you, really for me, it was transformative. Whenever I read it, it was like, oh my goodness, it helped me to understand myself better and make better decisions, and to understand the people that I work with, that I serve, and why do they make the choices that they do. Okay, so Carrie, thank you. You said the topic interests you. And Lacey's saying to learn more about the mindset of my clients and how to help them navigate life. Thank you. We are definitely going to talk about that. And Ellen said, what a day to be thinking about this. I'm looking for greater understanding of others thinking who don't think like me. There you go. William says he's open to learning, and Jennifer sounds interesting, hoping to learn new things. Okay, no pressure there. Everybody thinks this sounds interesting. So I hope you get the return on investment, your ROI that you're looking for. And let me look. Yes, Becky, for myself and our students. And Tiffany says, I love your honesty. I'm often flabbergasted by the decisions people make and would love to know why they chose to do so. All right, so let's get started then, right? Here's our agenda. I always like to make sure that everybody knows where we're headed. So we're going to do 4 main buckets. We're going to review research on scarcity and the effects of scarcity on decision making. And I'll define scarcity in just a minute. Consider how this research applies to ourselves. We're going to look at it for ourselves first, and then how this research applies to those we serve. And the reason I use the term those we serve is because you guys have already modeled it for you. Some of you are students, some of you are clients, some of you may have customers, but we're all kind of talking about the same. It's the people that we work with every day that we really, the reason why we're in the field that we're in is to help them. And then lastly, we're going to apply this research, and I'm going to ask you to think about, like, how does this research apply to what we do every day, and then ask you to think about one disruption that you can make in your practice or your program. And by disruption, I mean, how can you do something differently? And you might be saying, oh, I can't make big changes, but I'm going to ask you just to really think about, in your corner of the world, what can you do to make a difference? Okay, and so Lachelle says that she's from down at SWIC, and she's committed to this discussion because I want to better understand my students. She works with low-income youth with a lot of challenges, and I want to relate better to their point of view. And I appreciate, Lachelle, you saying that about low income, because the reason I even came about to find this research is one of our adult education programs asked me to do some training on the culture of poverty. And I don't know, anybody out there, I have heard of the culture of poverty before. Raise your hand, your virtual hand, your real hand, if you're on camera. Let's see if there's anybody who has a little bit of background. Okay, Lacey, yep, okay. So I started really thinking about, and as I was reading about that, I wanted to look for research that was a little more encompassing, that kind of, so that my concern was some of what I was reading was about like what those people did. And that sort of bothered me. And I'm like, I really want to look at a little more all-encompassing research. So that's where it led me to this. So a couple of things that to frame as we get started. Perspective informs choices, and that's not a mistake that it's all in caps there. I really want us to think about our perspective informs our choices, and our perspective may change from day to day and from times in our different times in our life. Choices that seem foolish from a point of view outside of that frame of reference or that perspective make a lot more sense when it's viewed from within. Now, I know we can't always be within, but at least we can start thinking about it in that way. So a couple of key points to remember. First is our conversations about the needs of those we serve must begin with compassion and kindness and with a frame of reference that we all can understand. And scarcity is that such frame of reference. And that's why I like sharing this research with you. Also, we all make decisions and choices. I know that may sound like, yeah, duh, of course. Perspectives, once again, drive our decisions and choices. And here's the real kicker at the bottom, y'all. Being without resources does not mean that someone is not resourceful. So that's really important to keep in mind. And this is the last, and then we'll move on. Decisions are often based on simple expediency or practicality. Expediency or practicality is relative to the individual and the current circumstances. So there's some examples. I'm going to really suggest that you pick up this book and let's get started. This is the book right here, Scarcity. Yeah. The New Science of Having Less and How It Defines Our Life. And I will tell you that when I was reading this book, it was sitting around my house, and my husband finally said one day, "Why are you reading about a scar city?" So it's not Scar City, it's Scarcity. Cutting edge research from Sandal Malathan and Eldar Shafar. They are an economist and a researcher in psychology. So they came together to look at scarcity. And scarcity creates a distinct psychology for everyone struggling to manage with less than they need. And at someday, we're gonna, even if you have everything you need today, there's gonna come a day that you don't have everything that you need. This research is a little bit older. It's been out there a little over 10 years. So then I was like, before I prepared this for you all today, because this is some training I've done in the past, and I decided to pull it back out again and put it out there and see if anybody was interested. And I was like, oh boy, maybe I need to update this research. And after doing a little bit of research on the research, what I really found out was not only is this still current, but this is being cited and used in a lot of other places. That scarcity mentality is now something that's used on WebMD, all kinds of places, pretty widely used. So I'm like, okay, we're gonna carry on. So what is scarcity? I told you that I was going to define it. It's an economic construct. Society has insufficient productive resources to fulfill all of our human wants and needs. Okay, seems pretty basic, right? And that came from Economics Online. That's where that definition came from. So now I'm going to come back to you guys. Let's make it real for you for just a minute. What's scarce in your life? Today, yesterday, right? What's going on right now? So if you don't want to put it in the chat, that's fine. But I'd love for a few people to put that in the chat. What's scarce for you? And for the rest of you, I'd love for you to at least bring it to mind so that this becomes a personal thought. Okay, Trevor says hope. Thanks for sharing that, Trevor. Jennifer says time. I think time's one that we all can relate to at some point or another. And Trevor's getting an upvote there for hope. Time and money. William says thank you very much for that. I can tell you the first time that I did this training live, a teacher said to me because then after I asked what's scarce in your life, I said, what about your students? And it was very interesting because he said confidence. That's what's scarce. And I thought that was really interesting to see that. Also, someone who was a recent empty nester shared with me energy in the house. Our house is quiet and it didn't used to be. And she was really missing that and she felt that scarcity, which leads me to the next question. How are you affected by scarcity? Some of you said time or money or hope, or if you, something I shared with you that others have told me in the past resonates with you. Sometimes, okay. Okay, and so Michelle says, I'm finding that a lot of my students lack support. A lack of staff might also be a scarcity. So what happens, you guys, when you're scarce? Think about for yourself now. When something is scarce, how does that affect you? How do you change? How does your mindset change? It can be stressful, yes, for sure. If you're running out of time on a project, let's just use that one. How does that make you feel? Are you more productive, less productive if you're in that place? And for some of you, it might be a little different. Scott says anxiety. Yep. Stressful and under pressure. Okay. Less productive. So let me say, does anybody here feel hopeless and overwhelmed? Overwhelmed. Yeah, that's a big one. One goes into distress thinking mode and just manages the fires in front of them. That is really interesting that you say that. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Scattered brain. Yep, I feel that one too. Okay. So now that's kind of framed our thoughts of what scarcity could look like and what it can look like for all of us. And as I kind of alluded to, scarcity is not just a physical constraint. I have less of something. It's a mindset. It's how we view what's going on that particular day. It's how we view our life. It changes how we think. And you guys have perfectly illustrated that in the chat already by the things that you said. I'm overwhelmed. I'm not able to think as I'm scatterbrained. It changes how we think. Over time, scarcity also affects what we notice around us, how we weigh our choices, how we deliberate, and what we decide, which ultimately is how we behave. So we'll kind of unpack these a little bit more, but just kind of thinking for yourself again, like, especially if you have a season in life where you felt a lot of scarcity, that you felt that anxiety, that you were stressed. How did that affect you over time? It may have even affected you physically if you have enough stress. I can tell you that I was doing this training before the pandemic. And then early on in the pandemic, I was talking to someone and somebody was said in the chat about putting out fires. That's exactly what he told me. He said, every morning I go to work and I have this list of things that I want to get done and I feel very hopeful. And then I found out there's like all these fires, not literal, but fires on my desk and I have to pay attention to those first. And he said, after I pay attention to all those, all the other things kind of fall by the wayside. And so he goes, I have a real scarcity of my resources because there's too much. I'm way too operating up here in emergency thinking. So we're going to get there, you guys, but spoiler alert, think about some of the people that you serve. Think about your clients, your students, your customers. Where do they live in their mindset? How are they feeling each day? And do you think that scarcity, that overwhelmingness, that stress, that something's on fire could possibly affect them in a negative way? We'll come back to that. But let me give you an example from some research. This is really interesting, I think. Yes, Elizabeth is asking to have the slide deck or research information in the chat. Yeah, Kirsten, would you mind doing that? That would be great. Appreciate it. So, and also Elizabeth, the book we're working on is Scarcity, right? Whoops. There we go. So here's the research, and this will be interesting if any of you, I have a personal connection to a firefighter. Kirsten here is married to a firefighter, so I was telling her about this research before you all joined us. So from 1984 to 2000, motor vehicle collisions accounted for between 20 to 25% of firefighter fatalities. That maybe is surprising to you, maybe not, but this was surprising to me. 79% of those fatalities, they were not wearing a seatbelt. Why do you think that is? So let me get back to, I want to give you this research. This was from Charlie Dickinson, who is the Deputy Administrator of the U.S. Fire Administration. He said, I don't know a firefighter who doesn't wear his or her seatbelt when driving a personal vehicle. I don't know a firefighter who doesn't also insist family members buckle up as well. But firefighters confront scarcity. Not only must they get on a truck and to the fire quickly, by the time they arrive at the fire, they have strategized en route. They use an onboard computer display to study the structure and layout of the burning building. They decide on their entry and exit strategies. They calculate the amount of hose that they're going to need. All this must be done in a brief amount of time it takes them to get to the fire. And they're terrific. Those firefighters are terrific at managing this scarcity. They get to a distant fire in minutes. They reap a big focus dividend. And by this dividend comes a cost. Focusing on one thing sometimes can mean neglecting other things. We've all had that experience, or probably you've had that experience. You can let me know if you have or hadn't, of maybe you're watching a movie or a TV show and somebody walks in the room and they start talking to you, and it doesn't even register that somebody's talking to you, even though it's right there because you're shutting them out. The power of focus is also the power to shut things out. And instead of saying that scarcity focuses, we could just as easily say that scarcity causes us to tunnel, to single-mindedly focus on managing. So let's look at tunneling for a minute. When you think of tunnel vision, what comes to mind? Is somebody that's like looking just straight ahead broadly, or maybe they're looking through a telescope or something like that. It's the narrowing of the visual field. What happens with that is the objects inside the tunnel give a really sharp focus because that's all you're looking at. You're not seeing the other things, but it also renders us blind to objects outside the tunnel. So that's tunneling. Focus is positive. Scarcity focuses on what seems to matter the most, at least for the moment. But tunneling is not positive because scarcity also can lead us to tunnel and neglect other possibly more important things. So once again, I like to just slow down for a minute because that was a lot of information and think about for yourself. Have you ever thought of a time when you were really focusing on something and something else was we couldn't pay attention to that? Think about that for a minute because the process of neglect, tunneling changes the way we choose. Yes, thank you. It takes away the ability to have foresight and plan for the future sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. And as I said, it makes us pay attention to what we believe, or maybe it is what's most important at this particular moment. And so we're not going to think about any of the other things. So here's an example. I'd like for you guys to take a vote on me right now, because I like the personal example, and I'm going to give you an example for me. I'm going to tell you something that I did, and I want you to, I'm going to ask the question, if the choice I made, if you think it was a good choice, or if you think it was a bad choice. And here's the deal. You can tell me whatever you think. You have to do it with grace and niceness. Don't be harsh, but you're fine to tell me, no, Sarah, I think you made a bad choice. So one of the things that I do is I get up, I'm an early morning riser, and I get up and I most mornings get up and work out. But I was a time period that was facing a really tight deadline, and I needed every moment that I could. And so that morning I got up and I didn't work out. Okay. It was a trade-off, what I thought was a reasonable trade-off. I'm going to spend this extra hour and a half working instead of working out. Okay. Now I thought to myself, well, I went yesterday and I think I can commit to going tomorrow. So I think I'm okay to skip this day. So what do you guys think? Am I up, thumbs down, yes or no? Put it in the chat. But do you think that it was okay to skip my workout? Okay, Trevor's giving me a thumbs up. He's saying yes. He's saying skip away. And Becky says no. Thanks, Becky. It takes away the ability to have foresight. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Trevor already put that earlier. And Lacey says, yes, you're allowed to have rest days. And then Carrie said, well, not if that's what grounds you. So I appreciate that. Right now, we're kind of both on the other side. So here's the thing. Ultimately, I guess it's my choice. It's my decision, right? And if I do go tomorrow, then it probably is okay. But I can tell you that over the years, there's been times that I've been very motivated, and then one day can kind of take me downhill, and then suddenly I'm not going anymore. Yes, we've got to get balanced to get both done. You're right. Um, yes, and that's a great comment, Lachelle. I think it's okay if you don't keep thinking about what you've missed the workout, that you really are being productive. There we go. The point of this is not so much whether I worked out or not. The point is thinking about like what makes a choice okay or not okay. Because sometimes whenever we're in a place of scarcity, if we keep making choices on that immediacy, like the choice that I just told you about, that was because it was good in that moment. But over time, I can also tell you, because I'm a person who's had the benefit of living many decades, that if I made that choice for a long time, over time, there would be some negative implications for making that choice over time. If it's a one-time shot, that's, maybe a little better. So that's probably why I told you that I really enjoyed this research, because it helped me really think about when I'm making choices, why am I making it? And is it okay to keep making those decisions? All right, let's come back to tunneling. Deadline creates its own narrow focus. The example I gave you was, oh my goodness, this project has to get done. So that's my narrow focus. It magnifies the cost and it minimizes the benefits. So long-term benefits appear much less urgent. In that particular scenario, the long-term benefits are like health over time. And when you're young, you can make those choices, go, oh yeah, I'll be fine. And as you age a little bit, you're like, oh boy, if I make that choice every day, then I'm going to have some long-term effects. The deal is, a lot of times those long-term effects don't show up for a while. So it's easy to make that same maybe inappropriate choice over and over again. All right. So tunneling also operates by changing what comes to mind. So this is fascinating to me also, that not only does it make us think about what's here and now, it also changes how we're going to think about the here and now. So we're going to do another example. Here's a little exercise. And what I'd like for you to do is grab a pen and a piece of paper and just start writing. Okay. So let's see who can do the best on this particular test. I know some of you are super competitive. So here it is. I want you to list as many things that are white as you possibly can. Okay. So wait, before you get started, I'm going to help you with this. I'm going to give you two things that are white: milk. I grew up on a dairy farm, so that's number one. And snow. We love a good snow. So snow is nice and white. Milk is white. So you go ahead and start writing all of your thoughts down, but don't do milk. Don't do snow. Don't do snow. Don't do milk, because those are mine. You come up with some other things that are white, but not milk or snow. Snow and milk are not on the list. Other things besides milk, besides snow, besides milk, anything else, but not those two, not snow, not milk. Okay, time's up. First of all, raise your hand if you just wanted me to shut up. Okay, I know that. Yeah, there we go, Lacey. Thank you. Thanks for being the first one on that. Kirsten saying, yep, you need to shut up. Okay, why did you want me to show up? Shut up. Yes, okay. It's fine, you guys. I wanted me to shut up too. I did that on purpose. I'm not usually, for those of you who don't know me, I'm not usually that bothersome, but I wanted to make sure that kept pounding in your head, milk and snow, because those were not the things that you could put on. So thanks, Tiffany. I'm glad that you could ignore me. That's great. Because as I mentioned before, research shows that tunneling operates by changing what comes to mind. One way to make a task easier might be to get some choices, but then that's all that's in there. So when you think about times in your life, that's all you could think about was what you're processing, this problem, this thing. How am I going to pay this bill? How am I going to get enough time to be able to write this report on time? You fill in the blank, whatever it is. So once the link between white and milk is activated in your mind, each time you think things that are white, that activated link draws you right back to milk and activates it further. So it's a loop that you're on. And so again, just because I know that some of you are going to give me a hard time if I don't say this, who put in the chat how many you got, even with me being obnoxious? 6, there we go. I knew somebody was waiting to put that in the chat. 2, 3, 4, great. So you guys were able to tune me out enough. But Becky was not. She got 0 because I was in her head with the milk and the white. But again, think about that. Think about that for yourself. Think about for the people that we serve that are preoccupied with all kinds of different things that are going on. Okay, so focus may lead to neglecting what you value. So it doesn't mean when you see somebody making a choice, and Tiffany, I think that was you that said that you were confused by some choices that some people, and you wanted to know more about that. And if you weren't the one, then I apologize, but somebody did put that. And so we might go, why did they make that choice? I'm going to make some assumptions about them based on that choice. And we need to be careful not to infer preferences from the behavior that we see. And there's a short vignette in the book that I'm going to read to you. And I want you to that perfectly illustrates this point. So give me a minute and let me read this to you. And then you think about, is this choice wrong? Okay. Once again, this isn't about me. This is somebody else, hypothetical. So let's pretend it's you, though. One of your biggest clients has informed you that it will be taking its business elsewhere. You convince the account manager to listen to one last pitch. She agrees, but says it must take place tomorrow. You cancel all your meetings and put off all your other tasks. You pour all your time into that pitch. One appointment, though, cannot be avoided. Your daughter has her city championship softball game tonight. For a moment, you even consider skipping that, but your better side, barely, wins out. Surely her pitches feel as important as your sales pitch feels to you. On the way to the game, your daughter realizes she forgot her lucky charm. You snap at her before turning around to pick it up. By the time you have regained your composure, it's too late. She was already nervous for the game, and now you've made her more nervous. Something fun has become tension-filled. At the game, you can't enjoy yourself. Your mind keeps turning to that presentation. Not that you can work on it now, you just can't focus on the game. You're distracted. And when your daughter occasionally catches a glimpse of you, you know she knows it too. Lucky for you, her team wins, and the jubilation helps cover your mistakes. But certainly your performance that evening would not put you in any parenting Hall of Fame. Now, I know some of you, so I know there's some parents out there. Maybe you can even relate to that. And whether you're a parent or not, fill in your own scenario that feels like that. Was that choice wrong to, to spend the time at the game, to thinking about your presentation, or was it right? I mean, if somebody if you said, oh, I just can't pay attention to the game tonight, somebody might think, what would they think? What kind of parent are you if you're not paying attention? Yeah, that they might think that you don't care, that you're a bad mom, right? But you're not. You had a lot going on, because what if you lost that client? Maybe you wouldn't be able to provide for your child, right? Because now you won't have as much money coming in. So there's other pieces to that. Yeah, the choice wasn't wrong. The person was in the right mindset to be able to present. So the point of this is, and there's several other vignettes in here that are really helpful, thinking about, again, cognitive load of what those we serve might have going on. What are they thinking about? What are they worried about when they have to make their choices, or maybe aren't paying attention to the full extent that we want them to or need them to be? So speaking of cognitive load, we're going to call it bandwidth. So here's old Thomas Edison saying that he definitely needs more bandwidth. And what happens when you don't have enough bandwidth? And in this case, we're calling bandwidth how much mental capacity is available to us. So how many of you, whenever on your laptop right now, I'm sure everyone is completely engaged watching this screen on this, you don't have any other tabs open, but other times of the day, when you're not at a webinar that I'm presenting. How many tabs do you have open on your laptop, on your computer? A bunch of them? I know some of you want to put it in the chat for that too. Those of you who were competitive and wanted to tell me how many they got on there. Yeah, 10 plus, 7-ish. Oh, somebody out there has 20. I know you're out there and you got 20 open. So what happens when your computer gets slowed down, when you have too many things going on? Okay. That also happens in our brain. We have all these different tabs that are open. These are distractions that can slow down our processing, that can keep us from making the decisions, the good decisions, the thorough decisions that we want to. So what are some distractions that might be slowing down your processing right now? What's going on? Not maybe it could be the tabs, but what else? What's distracting you from paying full attention to this webinar? Student messaging, conversations around the office. I'm going to tell you guys what's going on here, the state of the nation, things happening outside of work. I literally came into my basement office here at SIU, and the ceiling is falling in because of all the rain we've had. So I literally, the sky is falling right over there. You can't see it, but yeah, Michelle, tell your assistant director not to email you. Inadequate sleep, poor diet. Yeah, maybe you didn't get sleep last night, right? That's one thing. It could be that you're distracted. You're thinking about a bill that you have to pay or a task that you have to get done. Maybe you've got a sick child. And again, thinking about yourself, but also thinking about for your students, how many of them have all of this going on? Or maybe it doesn't have to be, anything serious or big or bad. It could just be a cinnamon roll. Like I smell the cinnamon roll, and now all I can think about is getting a good cinnamon roll. So bandwidth is all the other things that are going on, what's distracting us, what's keeping us from really focusing in and thinking about what we're doing. Okay, let's unpack bandwidth a little more with a suitcase scenario. And yes, that was a poor attempt at a pun, but we're going to unpack it. Okay, so here's the question for you. I know there's two categories when you're packing a suitcase. A big suitcase person and a small suitcase person. So what are you? Put it in the chat. Do you like to take a big suitcase? Big suitcase people like to make sure that they've planned for everything and they don't want anything. And they also want to go shopping when they're on vacation, right? I'm seeing about half and half, big and small. So, okay, a bunch of you are small suitcase people. Tell me why you're a small suitcase person. Because I know a couple of small suitcase people and they wear it as a badge of honor that they can get that. I don't ever want to check a suitcase. I want to carry on. Yep. Don't want to pay to check a large one. It's convenient, simplicity. It feels good to you, right? Yeah. Don't have that extra baggage. So for you big suitcase people, why are you big suitcase people? Go ahead and put that in. Simple, just in case. There we go. We want to have all the scenarios. Fear of not packing something that's needed, prepare for everything. Yes, there we go, Jennifer. I also want to buy things on the trip. I'd rather overpack than underpack. I want to be prepared. So, okay, you each have your reasons. And there's no right or wrong here, you guys. No judgment. But Slack is having a big suitcase all the time, metaphorically. So Slack picks up the tab. It makes us free for making trade-offs because if you have a small suitcase, there are times, correct, that you have to say, okay, I'm going to take this or I'm going to take this. Which one? Because I can't take both because I have a small suitcase. Those big suitcase people are like, oh, we're throwing it all in. We're going to take it all. That's because they have a lot of slack. If they want to go shopping, they can, and they can put more things in. Small suitcase people, well, they got to think about if they're going to go shopping or not because they don't have any slack. In life, when we have slack. That means if we don't have a super tight budget, if we overspend on something, or we have a repair in the house, if your roof falls in, like literally is happening here, and I shouldn't laugh about that. It's not a laughable matter, but if something like that happens, you have slack. It's like, oh, it's a bummer. Shoot, we got to spend this money to repair our roof. If you're not sure where you're going to get that money from, it might be, oh, goodness, we're not going to eat because we have to repair the roof. Or goodness, my kids are, that was vacation money and now we're not going to be able to take that. So again, thinking about for ourselves the decisions we make and thinking about our students, for most of our students, do they have a lot, and clients, whoever you're serving, do they have a lot of slack in their life for the most part? Or not a lot of slack? What do you see? That's a real question. I'm waiting till somebody, there we go. Limited slack, car issues or no car? Nope. Yes. I work with people losing slack. Slack can be, yes, Trevor, to your point, it can be defined in a lot of different ways. Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel like you have the ability to make choices? And yes, most of you are putting in, for those we serve, they certainly, for a variety of reasons. I used money, but sometimes it's time, sometimes it's health, sometimes it's, no, maybe they're situation here in the United States, all of those things are no slack. All right, so that kind of helps us to think about slack. Let me give you one more scenario about that, and that's a Jenga scenario. And if we were in person, we would play Jenga, but since we're not, we're going to do the next best thing, and that is to see a couple of people from Big Bang Theory playing Jenga. That's Sheldon and Leonard. So thinking about a Jenga set, and hold on, who's played Jenga before? Raise your hand, put it in the chat. Who's a Jenga master? I know there's at least one person here who wants me to know that they are a Jenga master. Go ahead, don't be shy. Tell us. I am really good. So then the next time I see you in person, hopefully I will play Jenga with you and you'll probably beat me. Okay, Michelle says she's horrible at it. Lacey's held her hand. Okay, great. Okay, so here's a nice firm Jenga stack, right? This is what many, I'm not making any, I shouldn't say this. This is what people who have a good foundation in life. I don't know if it represents you or not, but if you have people that help support you, if you have an education so that you can get a better paying job, if you have a place to live and you have enough money in the bank to make a repair should one come out, then this is your stack, right? Well, when things happen, like our car breaks down or we get a flat tire, we take a few pieces out of that Jenga stack, and now we're feeling a little bit shakier. But for those of us that have a good foundation, we can keep taking pieces out and then eventually we'll put them back in. I know that's not how the game's played normally, but in life it is, and we can kind of shore ourselves up. So that's the example of somebody who has quite a bit of slack. They have a good foundation. But for those we serve, it looks a little bit more like this. On the left-hand side, it's the people that already start with a little bit of a shaky. They don't have, when their kid gets sick, they don't have anybody to help with backup childcare. Okay, that's somebody that already has some pieces out of their stack. They don't have a car, or they don't have any money if they need to get a new tire, or heaven forbid a set of tires. They don't have the money to be able to do that. Maybe they have some health issues. So if it's cold and flu season, they can't be out. Those are pieces out of their stack. They look a little bit more like this in the middle, because if you're already having pieces out and then a few more pieces come out, then we usually end up with a stack falling over. And so when you think about with your learners, with your clients, those you serve, think about, what does their stack look like? And if they came and told you what's going on, I hope this Jenga really kind of comes to mind. It's like, okay, wait, something got pulled out, and am I able to help them put a piece back in so that they don't fall over, so they can keep coming to class, so they can keep going to work, so they can keep trying to get the training that they need to do better, so that they can take care of their kids. Those are helping put those pieces back in to keep the Jenga stack up. let's come back to bandwidth and we've talked a little bit about the research. Here's a little bit more. We've talked about ourselves and applying it and a little bit about those we serve. Well, I'm going to bring it home here in just a minute and kind of thinking about what are the practical applications. But I want to make this one last point about bandwidth, and it's about IQ. Two different research pieces that came together that's really interesting. So the authors did some research in New Jersey, and there's nothing special about New Jersey other than it's an American city. People were asked, they did it in a mall, okay? So people walking around in the mall, and I told you I was a little bit older. I know malls aren't quite as popular as they used to be, but people were asked about their income. And then based on that, they were classified without their knowledge, but the researchers said they were either rich or poor. They had means or they didn't have means. So when I say rich, I don't mean wealthy. I just mean they had means or they didn't have. Then they were asked a question. Your car needs a repair that costs $150 and you take a loan. So you have different choices. You could take out a short-term loan, you could pay it in full, or you could postpone the service. And then how do you go about making that decision? After they answered the question, so that was just to put them in a mindset, the subjects took tests that measured fluid intelligence and cognitive control. Both, whether they were means or without means, they did equally well on that test. But then the researchers changed one thing. Instead of needing $150 for the repair, they needed $1,500. The people with means did just as well on the intelligence and willpower tests as they had before. And the group without did not. Their scores actually dropped 13 to 14 points. That's larger than the drop experienced by someone who stays up all night and then takes a test. So thinking about 150 didn't affect them, but thinking about 1,500 eroded their intelligence more than if they were seriously sleep deprived. And here's what the researchers told us. That isn't just true of New Jersey. The same team studied sugarcane farmers in India, testing the same group. So it wasn't two different groups, but the same one, but there was just one difference. They grow their sugarcane and they have one harvest and one time that they get paid all year. And then they live on that income for the entire year. So they tested their intelligence just after harvest when they were flush with cash. And they also tested it before it when they were really struggling because it was the end of the year and they didn't have a lot of means. The same farmers, the same people got 25% more questions right on the intelligence test when they were rich and made 15% more errors on the executive control test when they were poor. Now, that does not mean that if you're rich, you're going to be smart, and if you're poor, you're not going to be. But what it does mean is having things that are disturbing, especially in that frontal lobe, what you're worried about, if you have slack or if you don't have slack, is going to affect your ability to make decisions, to learn, and to share information. Scarcity not only raises the cost of error, it also provides more opportunity to err and to make misguided choices. It's harder to do things right because many items, time commitments for the busy, expenses for the poor, must be carefully made to fit into a constrained budget. So there isn't a lot of room. Negative effects of tunneling are often stronger than the positive effects of a focused dividend. The final argument in this book was that it had the widest implications, and is that since the negative effects are often stronger than the positive effects, scarcity begets more scarcity. This is what the researchers called the scarcity trap. And I wonder if you've ever seen that over time, that unless there's a big change, often a person without means gets poorer over time. They have to have something that comes into place that helps them out of that situation. A company that's in a bad place financially makes increasingly worse decisions as it fails. That's what they found, that as they tried to get themselves out of a bad situation, that scarcity, it just begat more scarcity. And the last example that they used was a general making a series of disastrous decisions as the battle turns against him. And him was their pronoun that they used. Okay. So let's turn this now and spend the rest of the time thinking about, we just got about 10 minutes to think about those we serve. How can the bandwidth resulting for scarcity affect those that we serve? And I'm thinking you guys already have some ideas about that. You've got some people in your mind, and you're thinking about them, and you're like, oh, okay, wait a minute. I kind of see what might be happening here and some of the distractions they have going on in their life. And Malatham and Shafar said, we're saying that all people, if they were poor, would have less effective bandwidth. What they're saying is that we would all be affected based on our circumstances. So what they humbly ask in this book is, why not look at the structure of programs rather than looking at the failings of our clients, of our students? So let me give you a couple of examples of the structure of programs, and then I'm going to ask you to think about what could you possibly change to positively affect those you serve. Henry Ford, back in 1926, famously adopted a 40-hour work week. At the time, he was bitterly criticized by members of the National Association of Manufacturers, but his experiments, which he'd been conducting for at least 12 years, showed him clearly that cutting the workday from 10 to 8 hours and the work week from 6 to 5 days actually increased the total worker output and reduced production cost. Ford spoke glowingly of the social benefits of a shorter work week, and he basically put it in that time was increased time for consumption was good for everyone. But the core of his argument was that reduced shift length meant more output. Okay, so that's one thing to keep in mind of something that changed dramatically and was able to help people to be more productive, even though they're putting less time in. Another example is from World War II, cockpits. So let me tell you this little research, and I'll put this on here. I want a little visual because I've been talking a long time, and you probably need a picture there of what a cockpit looks like. So what they found was that they had a large number of wheels up crashes. Now, if you've ever flown on a plane, when that plane's coming down, I kind of like my wheels to be down, right? But what's happened is they were going up and they were belly flopping. And so the researchers like, what's going on? Are these pilots careless? Are they fatigued? Are they not trained well enough? What in the world is going on? But then someone noticed that it wasn't across the board. It was only in two particular plane models. And they looked inside the cockpits instead of inside the pilots. First, they were like, oh, something's wrong with the pilots. And they're like, wait, let's look at the cockpit. And they realized that the wheel controls and the flap controls were placed right next to each other and looked nearly identical. They made a very simple design change in those two planes, and it was actually really, really simple. They put a small rubber wheel at the end of the landing gear lever. I mean, like they didn't redesign the entire cockpit. They just did one little thing, and the crash has stopped. Now, not all problems are that easy to solve, but man, wouldn't it be cool if we could come up with some ideas of how we might be able to redesign a few things to help those we serve, whether it's our learners, our clients, to be able to be more productive. So let's think about that for a minute. And again, don't say, oh, if we had an extra $1 million or if we had 3 extra people, because I know some of you said that at the beginning, your scarcity is that you don't have enough staff. But within your world that you can control, what is a redesign that might help increase success? Because even small changes, like putting a little rubber wheel on there, can make huge effects. In that particular case, it was a matter of life or death. Anybody thinking at this point of something that they might be able to throw in the chat? And if not, let me give you a little more structure to think about this. There's one other book that I'm going to recommend to you. It's called Nudge, Improving the Decisions About Health, Wealth, and Happiness. And their premise is choice architecture. Now, whether you know that it's choice architecture or not, we're affected by choice architecture all the time. So I'm giving you these examples because you can think about how you are the architect of the program for those that you serve. One piece of choice architect is buffet line. If you ever notice in a buffet line, usually the most expensive items like the meat go last, way down the line. They might go before the dessert, but they're last. They give you like what's first in a buffet line. For those of you who love a good buffet, what comes first? not meat. What is it? Bread, salad. Yep, salad. And then you fill up your plate, and then suddenly, oh my goodness. So they're helping you to choose. They're helping you to make your choice. You could go past all of that and go straight to the meat if that's what you chose to do. But they're setting it up in a way that that's how they want you to partake with this. The size of your plate, that's an old dieting trick, is getting a smaller plate. If you get a smaller plate, it's been proven that you will usually eat less. Now you can fill it up 6 times, but it will help you in making your choices. End caps at the store. Who else is like me that every time you go to Target or someplace like that, you got your cart? Oh my goodness, those end caps are just so interesting. And there are items there that I did not know I needed. They were not on my list, but boy, I better not miss this particular organization structure for wrapping paper and ribbon because I have to have it. So I'm going to put it in my cart and I'm going to buy it. Choice architecture. It's putting it there to help me know what I need to buy that I didn't even know that I needed to buy. My favorite example from this book were painted black flies in a urinal. Now, I don't know if this is a problem for you or not, but in Australia, they were having a lot of problem with nasty bathrooms, nasty public bathrooms. And apparently some people had bad aim and they were not hitting the urinal. So they painted little flies in the bottom of the urinal, and people were like intrigued by that and started thinking about their aim, having better aim, and that's all it took for them to have cleaner bathrooms was apparently painting some black flies in the urinal. Now, not sure you're going to do that at your program, but could be an idea. So again, let's turn it back to designing for success. What are the on-ramps and the off-ramps at your institution? Do those you serve know that if they have to step out for whatever life gets busy, that they can come back? Do they know how to come back? Do they know that they're welcome coming back? Those are small things, but it could make a complete difference between somebody persisting or not persisting. Is there an opt-out rather than an opt-in? Maybe giving them some choices that they know are that you know are really going to help them, and just providing those to them, suggesting those to them. I'm not saying we should trick people into doing things that they don't want to do, but really making things easy for them in the approach of what you're suggesting for them. Frequent interim deadlines rather than a single distant deadline. Are we checking in often and saying, yes, I have this, what I need. You're doing a great job. Making sure you're inside the tunnel of those you serve. The only way you can be inside the tunnel is to know them, to make sure that they feel comfortable letting you know what's going on in their life. Add in some slack. For those of you who are teachers, are there places where they can say, hey, look, if life gets you down at this, let me know. Let's talk about some other options. I'm not saying dumb it down, reducing the rigor. I'm saying give them options. Maybe it's a timeline option. Maybe there's different ways that they can give you information, that kind of thing. Maximize and appreciate bandwidth. Even letting them know that you're thinking about that. And if you don't think that's important, I'm going to tell you it is. It absolutely is. It's so important that here is another little visual from my life. I told you that go to the gym. I used to go to Orange Theory Fitness. I'm not necessarily saying any particular one's better or worse, but this one day they have a little coach station. They're all young and fit, and they've got microphones, and they're really motivating. But one day I walked by the coach's station, and that is my finger holding that Post-it note. And I took a picture of it because it was reminding the coaches that they should remind us of our why. Why am I using this particular apparatus? What's its purpose? How is it going to benefit me in life? Why should I keep working? Why should I keep coming? The why. The why is super important. So again, if there's nothing else from that list that you think that you have control over, helping those you serve understand that in that short-term goal and the long-term goal, the benefits of what they're doing. All right, so a couple more things just to think about. I know we're about at time, but I'd love if any of you are thinking of one small thing that you could do. And thank you for team outing like a lunch or happy hour or a potluck once a week, something to keep people going. So think about Henry Ford and his vast change. But what are your innovations or disruptions? Disruption, the reason I use that word is think about how much our world has changed in just the last few years. Uber, Lyft, any type of shared ride, it's changed so much. The apps that we have that help us, AI, the list goes on and on. These are all disruptions. And so we need to disrupt our world a little bit. We need to think about how can I make a change that's really going to make an impact for our learners, for those we serve, for our clients. Can we use technology, scheduling? Can we give smaller chunks of time and information? That's a very simple thing that anybody could look at is what's the information that I'm sharing and how could I chunk that? How can I put it in a way that's more manageable for somebody? How can I follow up and give them the information that they want and they need so that they don't have to feel stupid going, I know you told me, but I don't really remember. Nobody wants to be that person. So make that part of that easy for them. Make it relevant. How is it going to help them in their life? All of those are very simple ways that we can design for success. So before we leave today, I really am going to ask you now, I mentioned a couple times, but I'd love for you, if you don't want to put it in the chat, then please just write it down for yourself. What's one disruption that you're going to make in your cockpit? And I put a couple of just, whether you are talking one-on-one with a client, whether you're in front of a classroom, whether you're sitting down in a meeting, those are all places that we can think about how can we disrupt our cockpit to make things better for those we serve. Okay, so that is the information that I have for you. If you didn't already get the note-taking page or the slides, they will be, I believe, Kirsten, we can put that on with the recording. And I really want to encourage you. Nobody's put anything in the chat yet. I'm going to put my contact up there if you want to give me a shout out. I'd love to talk further about this. I love this information. But anybody else want to share one thought of how they're going to disrupt before we close up today? You can also unmute if you want. All right. Well, I didn't tee anybody up to put anything in. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Lacey. Thanks for not leaving me hanging. Appreciate it. Ask future focused questions to the client, short-term and long-term focus. Hey, I'm just going to mention, Lacey, since you said that about short-term, long-term, one of the things that I love, and I haven't done this for years because I haven't actually been in the classroom for a little bit, but I love 5-minute goals. We used to, I was like, okay, so often I had learners who were overwhelmed. I said, okay, wait. What do you want to, what's your win that you want in the next 5 minutes? What are you going to accomplish? Now, we can't only do 5-minute goals, but 5-minute goal success leads to another 5-minute goal success, which leads to, those longer term. So I love that, breaking it shorter term and longer term focus, helping them. Adam says, pay attention to their preferred mode of communication, texting, email, call, etc. You know what, Adam, that's going to go a long way because meeting somebody where they are and valuing them and letting them know, hey, I'm gonna come alongside you in the way that works best for you, honors them. And that's going to make a huge difference in their motivation. So thank you for suggesting that. And everybody today, I hope that this has been helpful to you. And I hope that you're able to do one small impact to change for your learners, for your clients, for your customers. And ask what customers what they're scarce of, and they probably have to have a little context around that, but helping them to really manage that and helping come alongside and say, we all have places where we are possibly struggling and being mindful of that and sharing that with others. Once again, that honors the people that we serve, and that is important. We all want that as human beings. All right. Thank you all very much for the work that you do. Thank you for sharing with an hour with me today. And I look forward to talking and working with you again.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Everyone have a great rest of your Wednesday.